Hey, this is David, and this is the demo video for the PR Story Pro dashboard capstone project. So before I show you the results of our project, I want to show you PR Story Pro so you can compare and contrast the two. So I'm going to show you. This is the home screen of PR Story Pro, and over here you can select a production line that you want to view data for. So for this example, I'm going to select this production line. There's a couple parameters here that you can change. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to click Start. After this loads in, you can see a bunch of information about that production line. So we have an unplanned downtime and a planned downtime chart. And then we also have a teamwork chart. And on the screen, I'm allowed to mess with these buttons to change what gets displayed, as well as a waterfall chart over here. So one thing you'll notice is that when I switch between these two charts, I can only view one page at a time for this production line. And sometimes it might be desirable to view, say, the unplanned downtime, planned downtime, and the waterfall chart at the same time. And maybe it might be desirable to be viewing this information for more than one production line. So then one more thing I want to show you is the gap analysis. So here are the results of a gap analysis calculation. But you'll notice that I can only view either the gap analysis calculation or the loss analysis calculation at one time, so I can't view both. So the goal of the droplet program was to provide more flexibility for the user so that if I wanted to, I could view both calculations at the same time, or perhaps for multiple production lines. So now jumping into the dashboard, here's the main screen. So on the main screen, I can either choose to load or create a new dashboard. And for the sake of this demo, I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it the Capstone Demo Dashboard. So then once I save this dashboard, in the future, when I go to the homepage again, I can load this dashboard and all the contents inside of it. So now that we have a dashboard, we need to add some UI components into it. So first, I'm going to create a library. And a library, like we said, a library is a container for various droplets. And the idea behind these libraries is that one day we'll be able to import and export libraries. So if I create a set of droplets and I want other people to be able to use them, I can give them my library and have them import it into their program. So I'll name this library, and I want to add some droplets. So I'm going to create two of them. I'm going to call this loss analysis. I'm going to call this. So for each droplet, I can add a calculation to it. And so these two are the ones that are currently available, the loss analysis and gap analysis. So these are the ones that I showed in PR Story Pro. So for this one, I want to add a loss analysis calculation. And then in the calculation, I can add UI elements. And so for loss analysis, I can add these four charts. So I'm going to add all of them just to show them off. And you can see as I'm adding them that they get added into this droplet. And now same for gap analysis. For the gap analysis droplet, I want to add a gap analysis calculation. And then when I go to add calculations here, add graphs, there's a main graph that I can add and also a targets graph. So I'm going to add both of these. So now that I've added the droplets that I want into the library, I can click create. And now, ignore this one. This is the one that I created. So now you can see that here that in my existing libraries, I have a library for these two droplets. So now that I have these two droplets, I can add them to my dashboard. And so I'll do that now. You'd right click the droplet that you want to add and then click that button. For each droplet, we have to select a production line. So like over here, I selected AB Healthcare, Double Duty 01. I'm going to do the same for these. So you would right click the calculation to select data. And this window pops up. It's very similar to the one on the homepage for PRStory Pro. And I'm going to choose the same production line for the last 7 days. Okay. And I'm also going to do the same for the gap analysis. Once I have these set up, I can go to arrange my droplets. So now that I have some stuff in here, I have a loss analysis and a gap analysis droplet. So for our dashboard types, we have a panel type. And with the panel, you can choose the size of the grid that you want these graphs to be displayed in. So if I pick my loss analysis droplet and I pick my loss analysis calculation, you can see that the 4 graphs that I added in, they're now over here, and I can drag them into my dashboard area. And then for rotating as well, we said that for a rotating panel, I can add these 4 units in, click start, and it'll rotate between each of these UI components every time interval that I specify. For this one, I'm going to do panels for now just to show you. And I'm going to add in the waterfall and the teamwork chart. And then just to demonstrate for you that I can do different calculations, I'm also going to add in the gap analysis calculation. And then I'm going to click start. So once you click start, the dashboard will go ahead and pull data from the database. So this is what it looks like. Now for each chart, you can right click it and you can open the parameters and you can change these parameters and have it reflect on the graphs. So one of the design choices that we chose to have was that while in PRStory Pro you can interact with these graphs with buttons over here, we didn't want the user to do that over here. We wanted them to do it through a parameters page instead. So this is the gap analysis in PRStory Pro, and this is the gap analysis for our droplets. So if you notice, if you pay attention to this droplet here, if I change these parameters, again, the changes will reflect back here. And I have a bunch of these things that I can play around with. So if I wanted to expand it out a little bit. Okay, this is the gap analysis targets calculation, which doesn't have any parameters. Here's a teamwork chart. And so I can change between the types of view. So there's an overview and a loss comparison. If I were to click on the loss comparison, it would update. And then I can choose the bars that are getting displayed. All right. So this is cool because I'm allowed to view gap analysis and loss analysis calculations at the same time. And while I selected the same production line for both of these calculations, if I wanted to, I could pick different production lines. So now let me stop it here. And let me change the dashboard type to rotating, to give you an example. So again, I'm going to use the same 4. And the order that I put these in determines the order of rotation. So it'll rotate from the first row to the right, and then the second row to the right, and etc., etc. So if I click start again, it's going to start with this one, and in 15 seconds it'll rotate to the next one. So for this semester, the only types of dashboards that we got were rotating and the panel one. In the future, so you see it updated here, in the future we would also like to do rotating panel. And the idea behind that is that it'll not only rotate, it'll rotate between, let me show you here. If this is one panel, and I have a different panel set up somewhere else for a different configuration, the rotating panel function will be that it swaps between this panel and a different panel that I have set up. For dashboard interactions, we didn't get a chance to go over that, but the idea is that this is the demo that I'm giving you is for the interactive mode. So here I can play around with the UI components and I can arrange them how I want to. For a non-interactive mode, this would minimize to the system tray, and you'd be able to hover over and see a little display going on that's just rotating between the UI components. But we didn't get a chance to do that. And then also, one more thing, we do have a full screen mode. So for rotating, it would just display and rotate, but in full screen. So that's the progress that we have so far for the dashboard. And like I said again, the work that still needs to be done is that we need to implement rotating panels, and we also need to implement the non-interactive mode. Currently we have two calculations, gap analysis and loss analysis. In the future, we might consider adding in more types of calculations. So here's a list of the calculations that are provided in PR Story Pro. We might choose to add a Weibull calculation or a survival calculation, and that'll mean that you'll be able to see the respective graphs, but in the dashboard.